My name is Gurnam Singh, and I'd like to welcome you to another SIKH think tank program. The aim of this program is to bring intellectuals onto the channel to give them an opportunity to offer critical and objective analysis of issues of concern to Sikhs across the world. And I just want to say that the views expressed by our guests do not reflect any of the editorial policy of the Punjab Broadcast Channel, and that my job as a presenter is not to give my views, to express my opinions, but to probe and to interrogate the answers that our guests give, and also to maybe represent the viewers and what they might also want to ask. But before we go into today's show and I introduce the topic, ਅੱਜ ਬੱਬਰ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਬੱਬਰ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਦੀ ਬਰਸੀ ਹੈ। ਆਪ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਗਾ ਕਿ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੱਬਰ 9 ਅਗਸਤ 1992 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 37 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਉਮਰ ਤੇ ਪਟਿਆਲਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਰੇਡ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਪਾ ਗਏ ਸੀਗੇ। ਬੱਬਰ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਉਹ ਐਸੇ ਸ਼ਖਸ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇੱਕ ਯੋਧਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨਾਮਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਰੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਕੀ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਣਗੇ। 13 ਅਪ੍ਰੈਲ 1978 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਾਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਔਰ ਉਸੇ ਦਿਨ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਰੰਕਾਰੀ ਕਾਂਡ ਵਾਪਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਸੋ ਉਸੇ ਦਿਨ ਭਾਈ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵਚਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣ ਘਰ ਵਾਪਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ। ਤਾਂ 20 ਸਾਲ ਜੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਦਾ ਜਾਮ ਪੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਖੜਕੂ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਚੋਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਉੱਚ ਕੋਟੀ ਦੇ ਇਹ ਲੀਡਰ ਸੀਗੇ। ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਹੀਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਅਰਥ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਜਾਣ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ 1984 ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਸੀ, ਪਰ 1984 ਜੂਨ ਹਮਲੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹਨੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਫੜਿਆ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਸੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੀ ਜੰਗ, ਜਾਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੋਮਲੈਂਡ ਦੀ ਸਟਰਗਲ। ਹੁਣ 40 ਸਾਲ ਬੀਤ ਗਏ ਆ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਸਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਉਹ ਇਸੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਦੂਜਾ ਭਾਗ ਹੈ, ਪਾਰਟ 2। ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਸਵਾਲ ਇਹੀ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੀ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਆ, ਹੁਣ 40 ਸਾਲ ਬੀਤ ਗਏ ਆ, ਹੁਣ ਇਸ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਇਸ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗਾ। ਤੇ actually what prompted us to raise this issue today, as well as a general desire for Sikhs, I think, to take stock, is that recently everybody will know that, and in fact the Indian Bloom News Service reported on the 31st of July that of the recent return of the former UK, ironically, Babbar Khalsa leader Avtar Singh Sanghera. And the headline of was, and I quote from that, Khalistan bubble bursts, Avtar Singh Sanghera's eye-opening journey back to Punjab. And in the article, they say that his journey from a vocal Khalistan supporter to a proponent of peace and progress showcases a compelling narrative of change. In its way, it's a wake-up call for not just for the Khalistani movement, but for all those who hold on to perceptions of a homeland mired in the past. Avtar Singh's story is a testimony to the importance of engaging with reality, away from the comfort of distant shores. So, and other people have also been raising questions that if some of the forefront leaders, the main leaders of this movement, particularly abroad, and of course Sanghera Sahib is not the first one, there are others who are following, then what does that say about this movement? But if we actually think about 40 years, 40 saal beet gaya, that's a long period for any political movement. And if we look at the theory on political movements, such as the Khalistan movement, what you find is that there is usually some grievance and some kind of identity formation issue that kicks off the movement. And of course, what bigger grievance did we have than the 1978 Nirankari massacre? And of course, what happened in 1984. And then the attack on the Darbar Sahib really precipitated an armed struggle. There was a mobilization, a leadership emerged, an organization, and many groups kind of came out of that. Some civil groups and some armed groups as well, armed factions. But there were advocacy groups. There were human rights groups as well across the world. And then the movement begins to develop a shape and narrative about what it's for, and it does that through propaganda, through documents, through media. But at some stage, that movement enters a period where progress maybe isn't there, and some kind of negotiation, diplomacy takes place, or that actually escalation can take place as well. So it can go both ways. And if you think about the period between 1984 and 1995, this was a period where it was a fully fledged armed struggle, but the state itself used violence in order to destroy that movement in effect. And after 1995, the armed resistance, if you like, really subsided, and much of what's happened since has been really configured around campaigning and especially amongst the diaspora across the world. But then there's a kind of end point to that movement. It can either collapse, or it can find some kind of resolution. It can get into negotiations with its enemy, and we can see that, for example, in the way in which in Ireland, with the Anglo-Irish Agreement, the IRA entered a process of dialogue and some kind of democratic kind of resolution. So in today's show, we will be making an honest assessment in the context of the wider political theory on movements of the state of Khalistan, of the movement, and as I say, what next. And to help us along, we've got our guest, Dr. Jasdev Singh. Right, so Jasdev Singh ji, मैं ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਆਖਦਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਮੈਂ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਮਾਈਂਡ ਕਰਦਾ, so Dr. Jasdev is a medical doctor by trade, but much more, he's a writer, journalist, and long-standing human rights and political activist. He mostly focuses on Sikhs, but he's published academic papers and articles on a wide range of issues, including issues on caste discrimination, feticide, conflict resolution, and political philosophy. And he's also, interestingly, a founder member of the International Sikh Youth Federation, which was established in 1984, actually, I think around November time. And Dr. Rai also established the Sikh Human Rights Group to expose human rights concerns and to bring these to the attention of international bodies, most significantly in the United Nations. But he's also associated with the online news magazine Lok Marg, where he writes regularly articles on geopolitics with a special emphasis on the subcontinent. So, just the other thing I've mentioned Avtar Singh again as a return. Should we see this as a one-off single incident of a personal kind of nature, or is this symptomatic of a wider change, if you like, or even fragmentation of the Khalistan movement? How do you see this?
I think his return will be seen as a big victory by India. It will be seen, be considered as quite significant by India. It is at the tail end of a chain that had happened quite some time ago, where ordinary supporters of Khalistan had already started going to India and making their, not necessarily compromises, but their own sort of conciliation with the issue. But around the movement, for the core movement, I don't think it makes any difference. Okay. Now, I think what you need to understand is that there aren't any good academic analyses or books on the Sikh movement. Okay? I think Cynthia Mahmood was the first one who really interviewed people from the Babbars. The Babbars are a very, they are proscribed now, but they are very sophisticated, one of the most sophisticated organizations among the Sikhs. They're like an onion. You take a layer, there's another layer, there's another layer, there's another layer, and you never know the people you're talking about who are in the public sphere, whether they have any influence or not. If you have any contact with their hierarchy, the real core leaders who have access to, making the insurgency, managing that, they will probably tell you that he told them that he's going, but he didn't ask them. Okay. Now, there's a big difference. Okay, there's a big difference being told that I'm going, but not asking them means that there is a collective decision. Yes, you can go now. We are going to make a change. Okay.
So this was a
uh,
personal choice. It's a personal choice, yeah.
in a personal choice, and he wasn't really part of the core, really. I think that's what is one of the most uh, interesting things about the Baba Khalsa. If you have if anybody ever writes their history,
Mm,
um, the core group is not almost hidden in a way,
okay.
and you just don't know who is part of the core group, and
Mm-hmm.
and they can shed off a number of people, and it doesn't really matter because the core group is still there. So I don't think, in my opinion, it's not a victory for India, because unless the core group changes, nothing changes. Right?
Okay, no, that's okay. That's fine. Well, you can broaden the argument up a bit now, and as you said, that there hasn't been too much really kind of serious writing about the Khalistan movement. There's lots of different opinion kind of pieces, but I've just done a bit of an analysis and I've tried to identify maybe the four or five key challenges that are facing the movement. You could say what might be seen as weaknesses of the movement. So I'm going to put them to you, kind of like a hypothesis, and I'd like you to give your opinions, comments on this. So the first one, and this is stuff that I've picked up both in media but also in kind of my own reading of the situation. The first one is that there's a lack of broad international support. The Khalistan movement has struggled to gain significant international support. Many countries, including the UK, consider it a separatist movement and have not recognised it as a legitimate case. And this lack of broad international backing, in comparison to say something like the Palestine movement or other movements as well, that's really hindered their movement's progress. What do you say to that? Is that a fair hypothesis?
To some extent, yes. I think I touched on this last time as well. Okay. Um, the problem with the Sikh movement has been, you can imagine if you are an army and you've got the general, okay, and then the only people you have below you are the privates. Okay?
Mm,
An army functions not by a general having a direct contact with the privates, because a general's mind is very different, and
mm,
they cannot normally connect with the privates, okay, with the normal the average soldier. There's a whole sort of captain, major, lieutenant generals and things like that. There's a whole hierarchy who bring order to a system. Now, I told you last time, and I hope you don't mind, that uh, what has been lacking in the whole movement is there is a core group of people who were involved in the insurgency as a defense. Okay, there was no offensive actions by any of the Khalistani organizations. Let me be clear: they were taking defensive actions against the actions of India.
or
But
reactionary? Were they reacting? They were reacting, yeah.
they were reacting. Okay, they were holding the fort. But there's no academics or any lawyers in between. I said to last time as well, every movement politically is led by lawyers
Okay.
in the public sphere. You take ANC, they had Mandela, but they also had their military wing. Okay, you take even the PLO, there were some really brilliant lawyers there. You take the Indian National Congress, Vallabhbhai Patel was managing the military wing. Okay, but Nehru, he was a lawyer as well. I don't know. I just don't understand why this community has not produced a single lawyer worth his or her salt. So there's a whole gap
Yeah.
of interlocutors between the general and the average public. That
Do
is
you
what
think?
is lacking. It's not
Do you think?
lack of international support.
Do you think that there could be a connection between the lack of what you could call an intelligentsia making the case for Khalistan and the kind of activists, and that's why it didn't gain broad international support. As far as I know, no country in the world has openly supported this movement. And maybe there were some attempts to try and get some South American countries early on, I think Ecuador, but nobody's come out and said, we will support in the way in which the Palestinian cause has been supported, or even the Irish Republican cause from the States.
Yeah, a lot of the movements around the world, uh, they spent a lot of money in lobbying and getting support from other governments. Okay, they didn't just get they weren't just sitting there on in some hut and saying, "Hello, we want some support," and people countries running up to them, seeing some. No, no, they lobbied very hard, and that the quality of people who have generally been part of the Khalistan movement, they don't have the skills
Mhm.
to lobby at that level. Okay, at the level of the international diplomats, Gurnam Singh, they are usually PhDs. They are not silly people. All right, they are highly trained, highly learned people. You can talk to them almost about any theory, political theory, and they will know it. And at that, to talk at that level, it's not a matter of somebody coming up with a little knowledge of English and saying, "Sir, well, this is what is happening with us," and they're saying, "Yes, we'll support you."
But
That
the moment
the
that Dr.
intelligence
Jagdeep Singh
here.
Chauhan, he was a very powerful orator, Dr. Jagdeep Singh Chauhan. I mean, was it that he
Yeah, but
wasn't up to the job or something?
I don't, I have my own reservations about him. I mean, I met him a couple of times, and let me put it this way: he said anybody who would kill Mrs. Gandhi would be weighed in gold. Okay. Now, if you had said that, I had said that, Indian government would have asked for our extradition. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
and because she died afterwards, didn't she? And
Hmm.
he went there back there, just a small case, and he retired there. You see, so let's not talk into about Jagdeep Singh Chauhan, what
Okay,
he,
let me go to the second hypothesis now. I think you've dealt with that first one. That the second hypothesis, the internal divisions and poor succession planning. I mean, it's 40 years now. The Khalistan movement has faced internal divisions, disagreements amongst its various factions and leaders. These divisions have sometimes weakened the movement's ability to present a united front and pursue its goals effectively. What about that hypothesis?
yeah, I mean, obviously, if you, I mean, it started right at the beginning. Okay, so 84 when I got in there, and there was this chap called Kuman who stood on the stage very boldly said, Khalsa ji, it's only in 3 months we are going to get Khalistan. We've got helicopters, we've got planes, we've got tanks, and people were believing, and I thought, well, this is nonsense, isn't it? And nothing came out of it. Okay, so it was obvious that the majority of people, they weren't the, as I said, the majors and the colonels who could control the public, who could control the average membership. The average membership does not understand very deep issues. Okay, and they end up fighting, creating groups. ਉਹਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਲਾਣਾ ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਏਜੰਟ ਹੋਣਾ ਉਹ ਫਲਾਣਾ they didn't understand many of the things, and when they don't understand things, they started labeling each other as agents and
Mhm.
almost everything. I mean, I was quite surprised. Dr. Olak started labeling everybody. He's not here to answer now, but calling me a raw agent, and everybody.
I'll come to that later. I'll come to that question later. But just what about the succession planning? That in some senses, if we think about, I mean, you were involved with the International Sikh Youth Federation, and then there was
Yeah,
the Baba Khalsa. They were the two main. It seems like they're the only two organizations still now, but that they seem to have kind of weakened quite a lot since '84.
yeah, yeah. You mean in terms of succession on the leadership?
Bringing new people forward, in a sense, a new intelligentsia, new activists, the younger
Yeah, yeah.
generation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what. I was Pargat was president before me. We had a few educated people, and then I became president. Okay, had a couple, and then they all started shedding because they found the heat too strong. All right, and they just ran away. And I said, well, this is not how you fight. I was left on my own. It was quite funny. And I was running the federation from outside the organization with the executive committee. I had quite a few intelligent people supporting me. They were not Amritaris. So I still blame the Sikh intelligentsia. Useless, last 100 years, never there when the community needs it. They always find an excuse why they can't be involved. Some say, oh, I'm an academic, I have to be independent. Have you heard of
Yeah.
Conor O'Garty? Okay,
Mm,
one of the biggest world-known professor of human rights law at LSE. He
mm.
openly supported Sinn Féin and IRA. People, I don't know, I don't understand why when a Sikh becomes an academic, then he becomes a pristine, a porcelain. He can't be touched. He can't. I have to be independent. Independent of
Okay.
what? Okay,
Okay.
so I don't. I think you have to take the blame. The
Okay. I
intelligentsia
will.
has to take the blame. It
Well,
walked
let me.
away.
Yeah. Let me now take the third hypothesis, which maybe is directly related to the Sikh intellectuals, if you like. And this is
Mm.
confusion over what Khalistan actually represents. So the hypothesis is this, that the movement appears to have never really managed to articulate a coherent ideology other than some broad ideas about a democratic state based on Sikh teachings of respect for diversity, equality, and justice. Now, if one looks at the propaganda material of Khalistan organization, it invariably represents the case for more autonomy for the Punjab within the Indian Constitution. If somebody like, say, Atinder Pal Singh Khalistani talks about that we can create Khalistan within the Indian Constitution. Others asking for an independent nation, completely free, an independent Punjab, independent Sikh homeland, a unified, independent pre-partition Punjab, a re-establishment of the Sikh kingdom of Ranjit Singh prior to annexation, or turning the whole of India into Khalistan. So you've got all these different narratives, and maybe people are really confused as to what they're asking for when they ask for Khalistan. Is that a fair comment?
Uh, it's a fair comment in the general public. Okay, I had made my mind up quite early on. I think I told you last time as well that for me the central issue was Syria Catholic Sahib. Okay, so either you can negotiate a Vatican status for Syria Catholic Sahib, because that's when the community became quite angry when Syria Catholic Sahib was attacked. So if that doesn't happen, then you create a state to protect it. Okay? So these were the two options in front of it. Now, what about the community itself? Should it be part of an autonomous state? Should it be a part of that? Is for the people in Punjab to decide. I am a British citizen. I have no intention of going back there. Okay, I what for me the main issue was, why did they attack Syria Catholic Sahib? Now I think a lot of people think like that. On the question of is there a coherent thing? Gurnam, I come back to the same thing. Okay, Edward Said, look at him. He was a Palestinian. He destroyed the whole Western idea, that were pushing Islam, Palestine into corners. Okay, where is an Edward Said among the Sikhs? Is there an Edward Said among the Sikhs? No, there isn't. Okay, where is a Conor Gertie among the Sikhs? Is there one? No, there isn't. Is there even a Nehru or a Gandhi among the Sikhs? No, there isn't. Is there a Mandela among the Sikhs? No, isn't. Where is the intelligentsia? They had to put the thing together and
Coming
make
back,
it coherent.
yeah, but coming back to the point here. So you're saying that because we haven't had those serious intellectual work on making the case for Khalistan, a lot of people who maybe want Khalistan don't really know what they're wanting. Is that the point?
Yeah, I mean, an ordinary person doesn't know, because they haven't read politics, they haven't read theories of politics, they don't know what the origins of the nation state, they don't understand international law. Okay, they don't understand. I mean, one question. I mean, I think it puts into context when Master Tara Singh, apparently from his jail, when he was in jail in 1952, he was put around in jail again, and he said, I didn't know that you could create a state from religion. Look at Israel, right? I mean, the intelligentsia does not even bother to read outside, and that is what we are. It's ordinary people don't have the skills and the time or the abilities to read all these theories. The people who do, I don't know where they are. Maybe something we have to ask. Have the Sikhs been able to produce an intelligentsia?
Okay, I think
Yeah,
you made that point a few times.
group.
Yeah. Let me go to the fourth hypothesis, and that I'm turning now to the state, the Indian state itself, that they've actually adopted a more aggressive policy, flexing their economic and political power. So some individuals and organizations that were linked to the Khalistan movement have faced allegations of involvement with terror activities. They've been constrained. There's been arrests. We saw what happened to Amritpal in Punjab recently. This has led to legal actions, arrests, and worse, and bans of organizations. ISYF was banned, Babra Khalsa was banned, and that made it difficult for these movements to operate openly. And they've just been smothered. They've just been kind of snuffed out. What about that as another argument that in a sense it's just a defeat for the movement against this huge, powerful, and influential state?
Well, I mean, we mustn't forget that India is the third largest army in the world, the fourth biggest economy in the world. I mean, that's not uh, 10 pounds more than you and me. It's billions and billions of pounds more than you and me. Okay, what we can spend on something, they can easily spend £1 billion and crush anything. So yeah, from an Indian perspective, if you were managing India, you were part of the Indian intelligence services, etc. Those are the actions you would, if you could get away with those, you get away with those. And any person, my observation of Amritpal was, well, did he think what he was doing? Did he not take precautions on what the adversary is capable of doing, and did he take steps for that? In the last 5 or 6 years, I think there've been a series of people like this, personalities who've come up, but it doesn't seem they had done any homework on how to safeguard themselves, how to continue this movement forward, how to ensure that it's not crushed. After 40 years, you sit down and think, right, I'm going to take these steps. This is what can happen, and this is what I will do, and I need a team to look into that. So yeah, there was a lack of preparedness. I mean, all states, most states would do what India did. I'm not exonerating it. It's
No,
bad.
no.
We can take it up in the human right field and say they've done wrong. But America does it. Look at Guantanamo Bay. There's nobody who's been charged there. They've been sitting there. Poor chaps have been sitting there for
Mhm.
25 years. Britain's got quite
Okay.
a few people with it.
Yeah. So the fifth hypothesis really leads into the second discussion that I want to have, which was around your dialogue with Modi. And this fifth
Mm.
hypothesis saying that, movements kind of get to a point where they feel a need to engage in dialogue and maybe also
Yeah,
reconciliation. Yeah. So in recent years, there's
yeah,
been a growing emphasis on dialogue, reconciliation, and peaceful solutions to address the concerns of Sikhs. And this approach has shifted the focus away from supporting maybe a separatist movement, and this has dampened support for the Khalistan movement and we began with the example of Thal Singh Sanghera. We can also talk about Seva Singh Lalli and some of his meetings. We can talk about other cases as well. So really, I'm going to come now because in some senses, your dialogue that you had, I think it was in November 2015. Interestingly, just its anniversary is just a few days. You were instrumental in facilitating a meeting in London between Narendra Modi and some UK Sikh leaders, and we've got a picture of it there. Um, but you were accused by others who weren't at the meeting of being an Indian government agent, an RSS agent. So how do you respond just to that allegation that because you were meeting with, I don't know, was it what's his name, the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and others, doesn't
Dover.
that then implicate you as an Indian government agent? What's your response?
Well, for a start, I didn't hide anything. Okay, I said I met with Raw. Okay, in fact, I was even before because I was having meetings before the Modi meeting here, and British intelligence approached me and said, "We are concerned you're meeting intelligence officers from outside." Yes, I said, because it's part of a dialogue. When you were going to meet, when the Prime Minister was going to meet Sinn Féin, did you just say, "Oh, they're coming on the neck tomorrow," and they'll come? I'm sure you made a lot of you had a lot of meetings with them to ensure that there was no danger to the Prime Minister. So obviously, the Indian Prime Minister's team want to make sure that I don't stand in front of him and say Khalistan Zindabad. All right. So it's quite normal for intelligence service to be involved in something like this. Secondly, I didn't hide that I met Doval. Okay, I met Doval because he's the person who framed the whole thing. It wasn't Mr. Modi himself one day getting up saying I want to talk to the Sikhs. It's the whole apparatus talking. They then look at the what was the framework of the dialogue. This was a dialogue for a dialogue. Okay, it was the other thing. Gunam Singh is this is not the first time I've been accused of being a raw agent. Okay, it's not the first time I've been accused of being a CIA agent, ISI agent, and then even Russian agent. It's through since 1985. I've become agents of many organizations. I think it's a pity
But
I don't
just
get any money from
on
them.
this one, did you initiate this, or were you approached by the
No, no, no.
Indian?
They approached me because that article I wrote on Khalistan is dead, long live Khalistan. I
Hmm.
think they decided that, and then I printed a book on the Kal Takht sovereignty, and they thought that they could talk to somebody. Okay, I think they already knew because they had banned me for 20 years, and the reason they lifted the ban was because the British government intervened eventually and said, well, if he's a terrorist, tell us, because he comes to Downing Street, he goes to ministers, where is the terrorist bit on it? Okay. And they couldn't come up with anything. They approached me and they wanted to talk, and I was very blunt to them. I said, you can talk to any Khalistani organization. I have no interest in negotiating, being an interlocutor. You can talk to the Federation, the bubbers here, the official ones, and you can talk to America. The only people, and it won't make any difference. Okay. The difference in any movement, the change happens when the people with the arms lay down the arms. Okay? And that's what they wanted to talk about. Right? That's the group they wanted to talk with, and that's where, and there's a lot of these things are very secretive. I can't reveal them, but that was the basis of the dialogue, and those are the conditions were put that you must, these are the conditions are that India will have a dialogue. India cannot say that we can only talk within the constitution, and in return we will keep an open. It was going to be an open dialogue. So it was a dialogue about a dialogue, but to create the conditions for that, it was, well, open the visas for everybody. They said there are a few people, about 35 people, they can't give visas to, and it has to go through the security apparatus. And a release of prisoners, which they've done, most of them, apart from the ones as told last time, the Beyant Singh ones, and two from the group that was on the table at that time from my list. But there's a reason why they haven't released those two. Again, I don't want to shame anybody why they didn't release that. And then the third was the apology, which Modi did to some extent. So three of the things partly achieved. Fourth was the Syria Kaltiksa, which he indicated it can happen. It's up to you. And the last one, this is important, Gunam. They agreed to have a dialogue, not with the official Khalistani groups, okay, not the ones who are in the public domain, but with representatives of the underground movement at any place where both parties feel safe. And it was up to them then, okay, those organizations and the Indians to create the framework of the dialogue after that. Okay?
So you facilitated that process. That's what you're saying. That was your role.
I brought it to that level and said, yes, I pushed the Indians and said, no issue about no drama about constitution. We can't do this. We can't do that. Don't do that.
Well, now, let me put a point, because I read an article that you wrote in July 2016. It was published in SIKH, and it was a reflection on the talks with Modi, yeah, a structured progress. And I'm going to quote something, and I just want you to. It says those who are and I quote, those who are campaigning for Khalistan should not feel that talks are intended to end the call for Khalistan. A struggle and its core issue cannot depend on the continuing suffering of people for whom we can do something for. For instance, release of prisoners and removal of blacklists. The issue of Khalistan has its own merits and should be promoted on the principles and ideas that it is inspired from, rather than only a period of suffering. Most periods of suffering eventually come to an end. So what was the kind of argument there? Were you saying that the Sikhs are tired now and we need to give them a way out? Is that what it was?
No. Gunam, if you go to any of these Khalistani conferences, it starts with ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ, in a litany of ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਬੰਦੇ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ. Gunam, it happened, but you can't carry on saying that all the time, okay? You have to move on. You have to find a solution. You have to find a way to end it. Okay, you can't just build your movement thinking, oh well, who's going to be the next shaheed, and then we can come to the congregation, the sangat, and say "Enuvi Martha." Okay, that's not how a movement proceeds. Movements don't move forward like that. You have to move. You have to be constructive. If that is the only argument you have, what I was saying is the issue of Khalistan has its own merit. It's got legal merit. It's got historical merits. Why don't you introduce those? Yeah, and then the human rights thing is part of it. Okay, human rights is part of it, and you can't just carry on going on about Onvi Martaji, Onvi Martaji, Onvi Martaji. That every struggle goes through that. Where is the process of finding a solution? The solution isn't necessarily conciliation or compromise. The solution could be as the Sinn Féin has done. Solution could be as ANC has done. Okay, there are many solutions. Movements have to find solutions. That was what I was hinting at, and yeah, I think the talks. I told the Indians at that time, the talks. This the whole issue of dialogue is going to come. One, the organizations didn't believe, not the underground organization, the organizations who were in the public domain didn't think India would agree. Right?
Mm.
They just couldn't believe, and it came as a shock to them. And then what happened was they started a whole rhetoric against it. And the ones in the core group, I think they got cold feet because there was a lot of propaganda against the dialogue. Okay. But the second thing that happened, which I have full sympathy with the core group, okay, is that India is a country of habit. It's a country of habit. It's very easy to analyze what India's next step is going to be. If you start a movement in Punjab, what they will do there's a sort of a whole series of things they do. Okay, and if you're clever, you can overcome this. I'll give you an example. There's a BBC correspondent, and he used to question the Indian High Commission on human rights violations there, and he said to me, "Just Dave, they're really well trained. They answer it very well." I said, "Listen, you ask them two questions, don't you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Ask them three questions. In the third question, the man will lose his cool." What exactly he did. Okay. The next time he asked them three questions, he rang me back and said, "Just say you're absolutely right. He wasn't trained for the third question." So you
Ah,
can predict what the Indians are going to do. Now,
yeah.
what the Indians do, they did that in Kashmir, they did that in Assam, they did that in other fields as well. They talk to
Mhm.
the core group, they bring the core group, okay, then they mix it up with a lot of other people. All right. And so what happens is you've got two people from the core group, you've got eight people from hangers on, or say they will say other Sikhs also want to be part of this, or other organizations also want to be part of it, and those organizations are not part of the core group, and they create a confusion. I saw this was happening because Doval is quite good at this sort of game, and they called us back, and they wanted to bring 16 people. All right, I said no, I'm not coming. You take the 16 people, have a dialogue with them. Whatever solution you have with them, it is their solution. I don't really want a solution. I don't, and I told I asked the core group, do you want me to go? They said no, no, no. We understand what the game is. So
Can
there
I ask you
was,
one question? Just Dave, can I ask you one question just for the record? Because
yeah.
one of the key organizations was the International Sikh Youth Federation, ISYF. They were not invited, or they were not involved. What was it, that they didn't want to be involved, or was it that they were not allowed to be involved?
Gurnam, I think this is where I keep on saying the academics haven't done their work really. There's only two organizations with arms in there was three. There were at one time four or five. Okay, the IS5 is not involved in any arms struggle. It's involved in political struggle, and there's plenty of other organizations involved in political struggle.
But many of those
And I said,
people sat around the table with Modi were not all involved with an armed struggle. They were kind of people from the community. I mean,
no, no, no. Those are people. No,
although Minder Singh
Modi
was
is.
involved, he wasn't involved in any armed struggle. He was there, sat with around the table.
I don't know what they do is they invited a lot of people, okay, and when Modi came recently, I think they invited a number of Sikhs as well.
Mm.
But those talks, I had made it very clear that I would come to that meeting if there's significant time allotted to discussion on the 1984 issue. Okay, so I spoke most of the time. Okay, and Modi basically responded to that. The other one was there to welcome him, and I couldn't really welcome Modi, really, could I? I would have had people beating me up on the streets. I was going to say welcome, Mr. Modi. Okay, and I wasn't going to thank him, and then somebody else thanked him. So that was fine. It was all choreographed. It doesn't matter. The other 29 people there were just sitting there. They're businessmen and people like that. They were not part of any movement. They
Let me
call
let
the
me.
meeting.
Okay, I think
The
that's
meeting was
clear, and I'm sure obviously you can't share all the details because there will be
no,
some
no, no, no.
charter marshals. I want to quote another piece from that article because the article was in a sense you reflecting on that meeting. And I
Yeah.
quote again from you. You said the Sikh layer has lacked a sophisticated and multidimensional strategy to achieve their goals. Most organizations concentrate in one field or another without coordinating with each other in a grand strategy. Competition rather than cooperation often determines the outcomes. All struggles have to reach a state of dialogue. All struggles that reach this stage use diplomatic language, which does not compromise its core ambition, but at the same time enable the enemy to come to the table. The onus is also on the enemy. So what did you mean by this? That the onus is also on the enemy? What was that?
Well, I mean, the enemy. I mean, I don't want to call India necessarily an enemy, but it's the adversary in this whole conflict. Okay, so the adversary also has to show a degree of integrity. But in every, I was asked a few times by people, "Tu Modi nu trust karda?" Do you trust Mr. Modi? I said, listen, if you sit on a table with an adversary, you trust the adversary 1%, you've lost the game. Okay? It's not a matter of trust, etc. It's your wits against the adversary's wits. Okay? They will play their games, which they try to do, and I didn't go for that. I refused to go to be part of a 16-member team or 30-member team or 12-member team, whatever they wanted to do after that. I refused to have any official meetings after that, and I said the only meeting I've agreed to is 2 or 4 people from the core groups, they're representing the core group, to meet one of your highest officials outside India. That is the only meeting I've agreed to. Okay, I have not agreed to anything else. But they try to play games, and yeah. So in a way, it's up to them as well. If they want to end this, they generally want to end to some extent. I thought at that time. And the government is not one institution. There are plenty of there are different intelligence organizations. One intelligence organization, very powerful, wanted to see an end to it and move on. Others didn't want to move on. As far as they were concerned, the Sikh movement is dead. So why is Modi trying to have a dialogue with these people? They were trying to sabotage it. They even threw some mud at me in one of the newspapers in India, and I countered that. So governments, there are, even in this government or in American government, there are several pressure groups.
So those talks obviously they took place about at Salogate 8 years ago, and lots happened since we had the Kasandi movement. And as you said, that Modi recently had I think he had a meeting with Sikhs in Delhi that was highly publicized, with people like Manjinder Singh Sirsa, and the Modi government has been trying to make some kind of attempts to appease Sikhs, if you like, through holding big ceremonies outside Lal Killa, to try and talk about having Birbal Divases, etc. And so, how do you read that? Because some people say that these are just a kind of a hegemonic strategy. These are strategies to fool the Sikhs into a false sense of security, that we are here to protect you. And especially in the diaspora, we've got the 2020 referendum people who are busy organizing referendums across the world, saying that we have huge support for independence, that the movement is alive and well and hasn't really waned. How do you respond to the more current picture?
Well, I think what from India's perspective, okay, if you look at the recent conflict with China, the soldiers who were right at the forefront were Sikhs. Yeah, their value. I mean, outside. You see, I analyzed this right even in 1984. Our main issue is with the Hindu Punjabi, not with the rest of the Hindus in India. The Hindu Punjabi and us, we don't seem to have reconciled, found a way of living together without undermining each other. Okay, and what the Hindu Punjabi does is, because he's a Hindu, he can leverage the rest of Hindus, the center, because they are in the center as well. We don't have any all those sort of leverages. But when you go outside the Hindu Punjabi group, then you find a lot of friends in India. They don't understand. They have a lot of respect for Sikhs. They think we are the people who defend the country, and they want to please us. Now, what it's up to us to put the conditions in such a way that we get what we want. Okay? And then wait for the future. What we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I said last time, territories are never, they're not made by God. Okay, they're not finite things. They change. All right. And we don't know. So I see the solution at the moment is Darbar Sahib, out of the interference of the not only the Indian government but the Akali Dal as well, a place for the worldwide Sikh community to sit and make its decisions for future, how to deal with international issues. And the Indians would like the Sikhs to be part of their country. That's between the Sikhs in Punjab and them. If
Yeah.
people in the
Let me put to you, because I mean, let's talk about that now. We're on the last part of our discussion, and maybe on a more kind of concrete, because we've had a critique. We've looked at some of the kind of problems about Sikhs advocating their case. We've looked at some of the divisions, but you've got a very positive, if you like, a very kind of clear proposal on the table, and I think that was one of the five in your meeting as well. I think that was something about establishing the supremacies of the Syria called that Miri of the Dasbar. So let me quote you. You said that it says India should consider the successful resolution of similar religion-state tensions in Europe, and obviously referencing to the Vatican. Secular polity resolved its adversarial political relationship with the Catholic religion. Finally, in 1929, Italy separated the Vatican and negotiated an extraterritorial status for it. The Vatican and the world Catholic community have had constructive relations without each interfering in the other. Of course, we're talking about a completely different situation. In the case of the Vatican, the Pope was the head of the Italian state, and in some senses, he was coming at that from a position of strength. Whereas, what we've got is an SGPC, which is a pretty dysfunctional body. So, how do you see this kind of evolving from this limited political body called the SGPC to what might be a global, almost a kind of pseudo state for Sikhs based in India?
Yeah, I mean, I know you say the histories may be different, but the principles are the same. Okay, Europe decided it wanted to become secular. The Vatican wasn't very happy because they consider themselves. The Vatican also believes in miri piri. They have two swords. The Pope has two swords, and eventually the settlement was okay. You stay in this boundary, and outside that boundary you don't interfere with us, we don't interfere in you. You have the global Catholic community, and they have a place at the UN, and they have their own ambassadors around the world. They also have their head priests, the cardinals. Now in India decided to adopt become a Western style nation state. eh? And it adopted a secular polity and things like that. If it was going to do that, then it had to find an arrangement with the Sikhs, with the Syria Kalpiksa. I think the Kalidal was very negligent in 1947 at not looking at what is going to happen to Syria Kalpiksa when we go into India. Okay, Syria Kaltaka was our sovereign institution, not Lahore. That was a sovereignty. That was the capital of the Sikh Empire one time, but then Punjab. And even now, I think a lot of Indians that I have met find that that's a very good solution. That the Sikhs can feel safe, can feel secure. That our religion or our belief system is not going to be interfered with, not just from the Indians, also from the Khalidal and the Punjab government. And yeah, so you can demarcate the land, and you tell the Indians, well, you do what you want. It's up to the Sikhs in India then, and you what terms you want to coexist. But I, as a British citizen Sikh, I want a guarantee that you will not interfere in Sri Kartik Sahib and Sri Darbar Sahib again.
Okay, I just I've actually got a question that somebody's asking by Makamal Singh. He's saying that you've talked about the meeting and some of the kind of maybe convivial kind of conversation dialogue, but actually in 2015 there was also this issue of the dossier that was completely, rather than a kind of carrot, it was much more of a stick. So how do what do you make of that? And going back to Ajit Doval, in some senses, he's hardly an angel. He's hardly somebody who wants
Yeah,
to.
what I don't understand about Sikhs is why do they think the adversary, the opposition, is suddenly going to become a saint? Okay?
mm,
People saying to me, ਮੋਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜੋ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਐਸੇ ਵਾਈ ਉਹਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ ਚ ਆ ਕੀਤਾ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਫਿਰ ਏਦਾਂ ਕਰੋ ਵੇਟ ਕਰੋ ਜਿੱਦਣ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਉੱਥੇ ਭਗਤ ਭੇਜ ਦੂਗਾ ਸੈਂਟਰਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਬਣਾ ਦੂਗਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਸੰਤ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਜਦ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ of course they're going to play their games and I said the government is not one institution it's IB did not want this dialogue to go on. Okay, that's Intelligence Bureau. Raw and Doval wanted this dialogue to go on, and there are NIA and others see who had their own ideas and what should happen. As far as they were concerned, so they are going to play games. Our people are going to play games, but dialogues continue. I mean, this is just I wish our people would study other struggles. Eh? I wish
mm.
they would understand our struggles. I mean, in terms of struggles, Gunam, you know, our struggles, it was good in the first few years. After that, I don't know, it's not even at the starting line. You talk about the money, for instance, involved. You know why all these petrol stations in this country are owned by Tamils? You know what the Tamil Tigers did? They used to invest in this. They used to give it to a Tamil person and say, right, here we are giving you a petrol station, 50% profit to us, 50% you keep it. Right? The Tamil Tigers budget was 200 million to 400 million pounds every year. They had ships, they had submarines and things like that. Okay? I mean, look at the budget of PLO. It used to own some of the duty-free shops, and eventually was cracked. They did it through many other secretly or surreptitiously. They had ownership of those, but when it was exposed,
Yeah.
they had to sell them. And their budget was 2 billion, not 100,000 pounds. This is most. I think this is the most Sikhs can collect. £2 billion a year. Yeah, and look at
Mm.
the Pashtuns. 20 billion pounds spent on that. Compared with those struggles, where are we?
Let me just change that. I mean, I think we've got about 7 minutes, and I know you shared with me some really important documents around the kind of number of think tanks that the RSS have and the kind of resources. And also, you gave me some really interesting figures on the kind of money that people, like the PLO and other liberation movement, you were talking about billions of pounds. So really, in comparison to both the kind of resource issue and also our ability to challenge the kind of propaganda machinery, we're in a pretty weak situation. I mean, so how do we where do we go from here in terms of taking that forward? I mean, do we need to set up our own think tanks? Is that the way forward?
Well, I mean, one of the things is there need to be some think tanks, okay, not on the television. It's think tanks. I'm a member of two national think tanks in this country, Chatham House including, and there's another one. And the way they work is very serious papers, very serious look at situations, and they bring on papers there, and then it informs the government. So what the think tank should be is informing our movement and saying, look. This is where we are. Let's now either accept the terms, not the terms, but accept what I suppose in a way what Sanghera has done as well, and then move on, and then hope another day something else will happen. So currently, I see. All the world's intelligence services are working together against the Sikhs. There's no intelligence services in the world which is supporting the Sikhs. I don't know. There may be. I don't know if somebody knows. Fair enough. But I know in 1984, I know the CIA was quite eager to help the Sikhs, and they went to Chauhan, they went to Ganga Singh Dhillon, and things like that. They were financing them as well, but they could not show the leadership. Okay, and then they just withdrew. They thought the Sikhs are not capable of leading a movement, yeah. So British intelligence services, Indian intelligence services. Don't forget, if the British intelligence services support the Sikhs, Indians can easily support the hardline Irish people. Okay, so countries have to they barter with each other how they're going to. They exchange a lot of information. Right? So, and the reality that is facing the Sikhs. I mean, maybe some think tanks have to bring this up and say this is where we are. Okay, not just saying because people who passionately believe there should be a Khalistan, they fair enough. They should continue to believe in it, but just believing in it, you have to put it into practice. Now, how are you going to put in practice? How are you going to collect even £1 million, let alone £200 million a year? Okay, where is the sources of that?
Yeah.
Okay?
Let,
Where
let
is the
me ask.
source?
Yeah. Let me ask you one last final question because we're gonna wrap up soon. I mean, we've talked about the Punjab Khalistan referendum campaign, which has been it certainly concerned the Indian government to the point where they have been making representations to various states trying to ban the referendum. I mean, and they argue that if in Mutipari, if there's just if this movement is washed up, it's a group of kind of individuals who may be on an ego trip, then why is the Indian government so concerned about these what are democratic kind of processes, and why wouldn't they allow, say, the people of Punjab to hold a referendum in India, in Punjab?
Um, yeah, again, as I said, if you had a couple of think tanks, they will probably probe behind this whether they are really concerned or not concerned. Okay, what you see in the public, I mean, if you take the Ukraine war, you see Ukraine is winning everywhere, isn't it? As far as if you read the Guardian, you read the Times, but if you go to think tanks, you find a very different picture. Okay,
Mm,
and they're saying we need to negotiate now. It's enough is enough. We haven't got the supplies and things like that. Russia is not going to be defeated. Uh, I used something like this in one of the asylum cases. Helped a lot of asylum cases, and
mm,
India's position was, look, Punjab is thriving, everything is fine. I said, well, look, in 1985 there were 35,000 police officers in Punjab, and
mhm,
this is a fact. Between 1985 and 1988, the number of police officers increased to 75,000. If Punjab
mm,
is fine, why is Punjab spending so much money on this increment of 40,000 extra police officers? Why are there
mm,
two additional DGPs and things like that? Okay, why not just get rid of them and save Punjab some money and you can invest? Okay, and the judge was quite influenced by that. I said it's nonsense. There is nothing. It is not so peaceful and things like that. It's the
mm,
peace is kept under wraps. I don't know what is going on. I was actually quite blunt with one of the Indian officers. I said, is this all a drama from your part to get money from the central government for your institution?
mm,
Okay. Why are you scared of this? What is the referendum going to do? Referendum in the end, they themselves said, we are a non binding referendum. What does that mean? What is a
yeah,
non-binding referendum? It's an opinion poll. Okay,
yeah,
why are you
yeah,
scared of an opinion poll? What's it going to do to you? Okay,
mm,
they can't go to any. Referendum cannot go to any court or cannot go to any official institution and say so many Sikhs have asked for Khalistan, you must deliver it. So I don't know.
yeah. But what
There's a
Bandur's
game.
group is saying, what Bandur's group argument is that, and they accept that this is a non-binding referendum, but they said that at least if we're going to make a case in the UN for legitimacy, then this will give us some legal kind of basis, some evidential basis to make those arguments. Do you think it has
Now
any
I've been at
weight?
I've been at the UN for 40 years. Okay, I don't know any place where the UN had said, "Oh yeah, we'll do a referendum for you." It has to go through the five veto powers.
Mm,
Right? Which veto power is with us? Germany? No, no, sorry, France or Britain or USA or Russia or China? Which one is supporting us?
mm, mhm.
For UN to hold a referendum, those five veto powers have to support us first. Okay,
What about
so
China? What about China, India's adversary?
has China supported? Is it running a movement, Sikh movement there? I mean,
Well,
what about
there are
China?
things
Is
against
any
them.
group in consultation with China? And if China puts this at the Security Council, let's say, wild imagination, China says, "Okay, we'll support you because we are against India, and we'll put it in the Security Council." You think the other four will say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah"? Right? Britain is going to raise its hand and say, "I veto it." USA is going to veto it. Right?
Okay.
So,
So,
let's be realistic. The UN has not held a referendum anywhere unless the Security Council has sanctioned it.
okay, just Dave, we've now reached our time, so I'm just going to give you a last 2 or 3 minutes to maybe just to do any concluding comments and any messages you would like to give to the Sikh Khalistani Jathebandis. So I know they're watching keenly today.
Well, I mean, I think the Sikh Khalistani Jathebandis need to start reading about other organizations, other movements, etc. The Indian Congress Party had 260 full-time workers working on various issues. Not that they were not workers who were knocking doors and saying vote for us, etc. This is the administrative, the think tanks and things like that. Okay, that is before 1947. Has the Akali Dal got a think tank yet? 100 years now. Okay, in this modern world, even the gurus had think tanks. Okay, they had a lot of people who were supporting them, feeding information, things like that. The Maharaja Ranjit Singh has been called the best Maharaja in the world, not because he looked fine and he had a mustache and a beard and things like that, because he had a very strong administrative system supporting him. He had lots of advisors. He had think tanks. Yeah. Uh, so where we are in the 21st century, why are we running movements as if we are running the village panchayat, yeah? Or we're running for the local gurdwara? Yeah? That's what they are at the moment. You want to up your game, and then look at the realities. Look at the reality. Where are you going to get £1 billion? Okay, where are you getting $1 billion, etc. Okay, and if the reality is you have to face the music, then look for what is the best option for us now, and then without closing the door for the future. Maybe
Yeah,
that's the
no,
best
that's
way.
fine.
That is okay.
I think you've made a good point, and when you were saying that point, I was thinking back to the Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and on the one hand, his whole Sarban's Shaheed ho janda at the hands of Aurangzeb, yeah. But then after
Mm.
Aurangzeb's demise, you have Bahadur Shah who comes along, and he has asked for Guru Gobind Singh's support, and Guru Sahib does support him and stays with him. So maybe a bit more kind of political nous, a bit more strategic operation. In some senses, our struggle will never end. I mean, the Sikh struggle is an ongoing struggle for justice, human rights, freedom, liberty, and whatever. Even if we established a state of Khalistan, then the Sikh struggle will still go on, because there are very few states in the world. They promise a lot, but in terms of utopian states, that maybe is precisely like it's a utopian dream. But we ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੂਲ ਆ, ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਿਲਾਸਫੀ ਆ, ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਤਾਂ ਲੜਨਾ ਹੀ ਲੜਨਾ. But I think Dr. Rai has given us some interesting questions to reflect upon. ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ, ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ, ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ, ਆ ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ ਅੱਜ ਥਿੰਕ ਟੈਂਕ, ਇਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਤੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਸੇਧ ਲੈ ਲਈਏ. Let's have this as an invitation to think more seriously about what we want to achieve, how we might achieve it, and what strategy we might develop that can enable us to move forward. Because I think at the moment we're at least a standstill, if not going backwards. So just there, thanks very much. And we will do another third one in the studio, and we will invite some of the Khalistani leaders to have their own back on you, and maybe they can question you as well. And I promise you that will be very civilized dialogue, yes? So thanks very much.
I don't mind. I've been in the very thick of things, but
Yeah.
I hope that we have a third program in which they reflect on what I've
Okay.
said. They need to up their game. Okay, they need to have a realistic plan and then move on from there.
Well, we'll try to facilitate that, and so thanks again for your honesty, and I think you've said quite a few things on the record. At least that gives us some clarity in terms of some of the process that happened in the dialogue with Modi. So ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਆ ਦਾਸ ਤੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਐਸੀ ਕਹੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮਾਫ ਕਰੋ. ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਸਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਏ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਖੁੱਲੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਆ. ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਫੇਰ ਮਿਲਾਂਗੇ. We'll have another think tank